Top 10 gemstones that are too volatile to invest in. They look brilliant on display. They sell with confidence in catalogs. And some of them, at one point, were priced above diamonds. Yet across 5 continents, gemstones once viewed as stable investment assets are being quietly removed from portfolios. Not because they've lost their beauty, not because the mines ran dry, but because the markets that once supported them no longer function. Insurance providers have stopped covering them. Auction houses have started rejecting them. In private investo. In laboratories, test results are coming back with inconsistencies that institutional buyers can't accept. Trade laws don't classify them clearly. And pricing models based on origin, grading, or projected scarcity have collapsed entirely. This isn't a list of fake stones or investment scams. Every gemstone here is geologically authentic, but each has become too unstable, structurally, commercially, or legally, to function as a store of value. The stones didn't change. The world around them did. Don't forget to press and hold that like button, leave a comment, and hit subscribe before we begin. Ranked 10th. Amber, a material excluded from asset markets. Specimen ID 311-A was submitted for material assessment by a private collector who had acquired it in late 2016 at a declared price of $8,300. The object consisted of a string of spherical beads, approximately 13 millimeters in diameter, golden in hue, surface polished with organic oil, and lacking any institutional laboratory seal. The stated origin was Baltic, with an estimated geological age from the Eocene epoch, approximately 38 to 44 million years. No excavation documentation was provided. Physical testing showed UV degradation across the outer layer. Under fluorescence, the glow was inconsistent, an indicator typical of reconstituted or pressed amber made from resin fragments. Internal spectroscopy revealed fine stratification not seen in naturally formed solid amber masses. The density measured 4.7% below standard Baltic ranges, and the refractive index exceeded acceptable thresholds, disqualifying it from classification as untreated natural amber. The investment record indicated a projected return of 12% annually over 5 years, based on market optimism tied to increasing demand in East Asia and Eastern Europe. No secondary offers were ever received. Major gem trading platforms rejected the listing. Insurance coverage was declined. GIA New York later reclassified the item as a resin-derived decorative object, no longer qualifying as an investment-grade organic gem. While amber's physical limitations are well known, low hardness, monos 2 to 2.5, susceptibility to surface abrasion, poor UV resilience, the greater risk came from its unstable global market. Since 2019, amber has faced 3 overlapping shocks. The war in Ukraine disrupted Rivne region supply lines. U.S. sanctions halted imports from Myanmar, where Kachin State remains a conflict zone, and synthetic infiltration, mostly from industrial resin and pressure-fused debris, has distorted pricing across Chinese platforms. At the time of review, no commercial valuation could be established. Digital listing platforms in the U.S., Germany, and Singapore declined submission. While the specimen retained its organic molecular structure to a degree, its liquidity as an asset had collapsed entirely. Amber, in modern global investment terms, no longer qualifies as a gemstone for wealth storage. It retains ethnographic, archaeological, and cultural relevance, but under current market and regulatory conditions, it meets none of the criteria for serious financial allocation. Ranked 9th. Fire Opal. The opal-bearing zones of central Mexico once drew independent miners from across Latin America, not for volume, not for scale, but for the one material found in rhyolite seams above 1,800 meters, fire opal. Distinct from precious opal, fire opal carries no play of color. Its value lies in hue, saturated orange, translucent red, vivid tangerine, and in vulnerability. The mineral is hydrated silica with up to 10% molecular water embedded in its structure. That water makes it radiant. It also makes it fragile. In the volcanic highlands of Querétaro and Jalisco, where annual rainfall has declined by over 20% in the past decade, The surrounding substrate has become increasingly brittle. Opal seams are now exposed to prolonged dry seasons, high surface temperatures, and dust accumulation. Mining sites are frequently left unstaffed for weeks, not for lack of ore, but for fear of collapse. On-site gem cutters report up to 35% post-extraction fracture rate. That number rises if the stones are stored without humidity controls. Commercially, fire opal remains outside any international grading consensus. No universal system defines its clarity, color zoning, or transparency thresholds. In auctions, price variability can exceed 600% between local and overseas buyers. Stones that retail for four figures in East Asian markets often fail to meet minimum reserve prices in North America. And when drought forces a halt in mining, speculative pricing surges briefly, only to correct violently within weeks once supply resumes. Investors who entered during 2016 to 2018 cycles faced losses exceeding 80% by resale. This instability is compounded by market misidentification. Fire opal's vivid hues, especially in translucent material, have led to misclassification alongside synthetic sapphire, colored glass, and dyed quartz. Retail-grade stones, particularly in Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe, are frequently misrepresented, with certifications either absent or issued by non-accredited labs. Buyer confidence has not recovered from these incidents, and institutional buyers rarely include fire opal in curated portfolios. Environmental reports from 2022 show further complications. Regions near Tequisquiapan recorded soil destabilization from artisanal mining runoff, triggering state-level restrictions on water usage during extraction. Several quarries closed voluntarily in response, while others shifted production toward lower-value material, less affected by thermal variation. Across the region, fire opal is still mined, but it is no longer stored, no longer scaled, and rarely held long enough to appreciate in value. What remains is a material still admired for its color, but abandoned by every mechanism needed to preserve it as an investment asset. Too unstable to store, too irregular to grade, and too easily fractured both in structure and in market. Ranked 8th, Zircon. The misclassification of zircon begins not in the laboratory, but in the lexicon. Across multiple continents, buyers and sellers alike continue to conflate zircon, a natural, ancient silicate mineral, with cubic zirconia, a mass-produced synthetic simulant. This phonetic overlap has led to 4 decades of declining market trust. The confusion has reached such scale that, in some jurisdictions, zircon must be labeled with disclaimers to distinguish it from unrelated synthetics. The result is not merely reputational damage, but structural devaluation. A recent audit of North American jewelry retailers found that over 60% of listings for blue zircon lack disclosure of heat treatment. This omission violates FTC jewelry guidelines in both the US and Canada. When untreated zircon is offered, it is rarely accompanied by gemological reports that clarify origin, enhancement status, or stability. In many cases, visual identification tools used by sales personnel are insufficient to separate zircon from high-quality topaz or synthetic spinel, compounding the margin of error and eroding buyer confidence. Despite being one of the oldest minerals on Earth, documented in Archean rock strata exceeding 4 billion years, zircon has failed to establish a consistent investment profile. Auction data from 2012 to 2024 shows a decline in average per carat value by 38%, even in premium cuts. The mineral's high refractive index gives it visual appeal, but its buyer fringence causes doubling effects that can appear as flaws to untrained buyers. This has made resale performance among collectors and commercial dealers erratic at best. In Southeast Asia, where zircon is still cut and traded in volume, prices vary not by carat weight or clarity, but by the perceived likelihood of confusion. Colorless and yellow stones are increasingly rejected by export inspectors due to their visual similarity to low-value synthetics. In response, some cutting centers have adopted enhanced labeling, but these efforts remain non-standard and non-binding. Meanwhile, major grading institutions have yet to issue a formal classification scheme for zircon that would allow price benchmarking on par with sapphire, tourmaline, or spinel. At the regulatory level, zircon now sits in a void, geologically valid, but commercially unsupported. Its volatility lies in its market identity, a mineral misnamed, misrepresented, and mispositioned. Until that identity is resolved through enforcement, education, or institutional reform, it remains unsuitable for stable investment. Ranked 7th, Tanzanite. The Tanzanian State Minerals Tribunal concluded its 2024 annual review with a revised restriction on export classification zones for blue zoisite, commercially known as Tanzanite. The updated protocol limits direct foreign acquisition licenses to domestic operators based in Arusha province and introduces a new stockpile retention quota of 30%. The adjustment follows 2 consecutive years of underdeclared output, smuggling reports exceeding 18 metric tons, and audit discrepancies across multiple small-scale concession holders. Tanzanite remains one of the only gemstones on the global market sourced entirely from a single, geopolitically sensitive corridor. The Marilani mining zone spans less than 20 square kilometers, and its geology has not been replicated in commercial quantities elsewhere. This exclusivity, once considered an asset, now amplifies volatility. When the Tanzanian government restricts access, enforces embargoes, or withholds stockpiles for national auctions, the market reacts not with scarcity premiums, but with sudden paralysis. Buyers hesitate. Distributors lose access. Pricing becomes speculative. Heat treatment further complicates valuation. Over 95% of Tanzanite in circulation has been thermally enhanced to stabilize hue. While the process is not inherently deceptive, failure to disclose treatment status across retail and wholesale channels has led to repeated consumer disputes. Secondary buyers, unable to differentiate naturally vivid specimens from mass-treated stones, often refuse to engage, limiting resale potential even for verified assets. International dealers have also faced complications in shipping. In 2022, 5 U.S.-based gem importers were fined for importing parcels that lacked the new Tanzanian Certificate of Origin and Treatment Declaration. These procedural errors were not fraudulent, but regulatory, minor failures in updated documentation processes that shifted monthly under the revised Mineral Act. The cumulative effect on investor confidence has been lasting. Despite a visually striking appearance and periods of rapid appreciation, Tanzanite's commercial life cycle is now fragmented. It enters through high markup retail, rarely circulates through secondary markets, and remains tightly regulated at origin. For institutions, this makes long-term value modeling impossible. For private collectors, it means holding a material that is beautiful, but commercially unpredictable. Tanzanite has one of the narrowest geological birthplaces of any gem in the modern market, and one of the least navigable legal paths to price stability. Ranked 6th, Blue Spinel. The sample arrived without retail documentation, accompanied only by a private seller's invoice stating, Blue Spinel, natural origin, unheated. Visual assessment under standard illumination yielded a vivid cobalt blue hue with no secondary zoning, no color banding, and no surface abrasions. Under 10 times magnification, the crystal appeared inclusion-free. Refractive index, specific gravity, and UV fluorescence aligned with both natural and flame fusion specimens. Without destructive testing or advanced spectroscopy, the material could not be definitively classified. This is the core dilemma of Blue Spinel in the modern gem market. Its synthetic counterpart is chemically identical, optically flawless, and widely available, yet often mislabeled, underdisclosed, or deliberately blended. In the absence of clear provenance or institutional certification, even skilled professionals decline to authenticate without hesitation, and even when confirmed, the certificate alone does not secure value. Buyers unfamiliar with Spinel's rarity and easily confused by its visual similarity to sapphire or topaz frequently reject the stone on site or devalue it far below its actual rarity. Auction platforms and trade expos have quietly removed Blue Spinel from curated investment categories. The risk is not material degradation. It is commercial equivalence. A real gem that looks exactly like its counterfeit, behaves like it, and circulates in markets where labeling is inconsistent. Retailers often conflate synthetic, lab-grown, and man-made without clarification, further degrading buyer trust. Attempts to establish price baselines for natural cobalt spinel have failed due to inconsistent disclosure and buyer hesitancy. Across Southeast Asia, inspectors report shipments where up to 60% of natural parcels include synthetics without proper marking. In 2021, a shipment bound for a North American distributor was detained for misrepresentation. The stones were flawless. No fraud was proven, but no sales proceeded either. In the context of investment, blue spinel represents a contradiction: geologically stable, visually exquisite, commercially unusable. It is one of the few gemstones whose value is not undermined by treatment, but by perfection itself. When no visible flaw can separate real from synthetic, confidence collapses. And in an unregulated environment, even authenticity becomes irrelevant. Ranked 5th, Andesine-Labradorite. Between 2002 and 2008, red feldspar entered the Western market under the name Andesine, labeled as untreated and natural, with origin claims ranging from Tibet to Inner Mongolia. Gem television channels promoted the material heavily, citing scarcity, color rarity, and non-treatment status. No primary source mines were ever confirmed. No government export data supported the volume. Yet tens of thousands of carats entered circulation. Early gemological reports failed to detect anything unusual. But in 2008, destructive testing revealed copper had been diffused into pale feldspar through high-temperature artificial enhancement. Subsequent studies confirmed a controlled treatment process, undisclosed, undocumented, and denied by intermediaries. The scandal led to one of the fastest gemstone devaluations of the 21st century. Retailers faced litigation, gemological labs amended previous reports, professional societies issued public warnings. Within months, red andesine was pulled from commercial platforms, with no redemption path offered. The damage was categorical. Consumers lost trust, wholesalers wrote off inventories, and feldspar as a category became synonymous with synthetic interference. Even untreated material, rare and difficult to confirm, could no longer be sold without suspicion. The gem's visual appeal had been weaponized by its own marketing. There were no regulations violated because no gemstone-specific international statute addressed copper diffusion at the time. But the economic impact was absolute. Collectors who had paid 4 figures per carat could not resell at any price. Auction houses delisted all feldspar from premium lots. Gemological laboratories declined to issue value reports for the category. The GIA and AGL reclassified all red andesine submissions as color origin undetermined, effectively removing them from the investment tier. Attempts to reintroduce traceable, untreated red feldspar from Oregon and Congo failed to recover market trust. With no visible indicators of treatment and no consensus on nomenclature, andesine remains functionally disqualified from any serious gem portfolio. More than 15 years later, the category is still shadowed by a single unresolved question: how an entire global supply chain collapsed without a single traceable mine. Ranked 4th, Alexandrite. The lot was withdrawn 48 hours before catalog publication. A 3.1 carat Alexandrite, reportedly Brazilian origin, with moderate to strong color change. The reserve price had been set at $68,000. Documentation included one gemological report and one provenance letter. Neither could confirm natural formation or absence of treatment. The lab report used ambiguous language: color origin undetermined. Material shows characteristics consistent with both natural and synthetic formation. The auction committee declined to proceed. This is not an isolated case. In the past 7 years, 37% of Alexandrite submissions to major auction houses have been downgraded, delayed, or delisted entirely. The reason is not visual, it is interpretive. Alexandrite, unlike other high-value gems, has no widely accepted classification system for measuring the intensity of its color change. The difference between a $5,000 per carat specimen and a $50,000 per carat specimen often comes down to perceived shift under variable lighting, conditions that cannot be standardized across labs, buyers, or sale rooms. Synthetics further complicate the field. Since the 1970s, flux-grown Alexandrite has entered both jewelry and collector markets, often indistinguishable from natural stones without advanced spectroscopy. Disclosure is inconsistent. Sellers may describe stones as genuine Alexandrite or natural origin, treatment unknown, both of which are technically legal but commercially meaningless. In resale, even certified natural stones often fail to meet minimum estimates due to market saturation, skepticism, or fear of substitution. No major gem exchange carries a stable spot price for Alexandrite. No price index exists. The value of the stone is driven not by geological metrics, but by auction mood, an unstable equilibrium prone to collapse under minor doubt. Institutions, facing inconsistent lab standards and fluctuating demand, have gradually reduced their exposure. And collectors who once saw Alexandrite as a rare hedge now view it as a liability. Expensive to buy, impossible to verify, and nearly impossible to resell. Ranked third, Burmese Peridot. As of October 2021, Burmese origin peridot has been removed from official valuation indices across multiple jurisdictions. Following expanded U.S. sanctions under the Office of Foreign Assets Control, OFS, and parallel trade restrictions by the European Union, stones traced to Myanmar's Mogok and Hpakant regions can no longer be imported, sold, or certified by most Western gemological institutions. The change was not gradual, it was legal. Entire inventories, previously categorized as investment grade, became commercially inert overnight. Prior to sanctions, Burmese Peridot was considered a premium variant, commanding multiples over Pakistani and Chinese sources due to saturation, size, and gemological provenance. Institutional buyers included the stone in diversified colored gem portfolios. But because peridot is not marked by visible geological origin, and because Myanmar does not issue export-grade origin tracking, certification systems could not adapt. Within months, peridot of unknown origin was either devalued or rejected outright. Listings were pulled, auction houses froze consignments, and dealers across Hong Kong, Bangkok, and New York began treating peridot generically, without geographic premium. Attempts to reintroduce Burmese stock through third-party channels failed under new supply chain transparency laws. Stones without verifiable pre-2021 import documentation were flagged or blocked at customs. In several high-profile seizures, dealers failed to produce proof of entry records, and materials were confiscated under conflict mineral protocols. Even untreated, unenhanced peridot was subject to removal, not due to quality, but due to origin. With no pathway to certification, no permissible resale market in the US or EU, and no price differentiation mechanism for remaining inventories, Burmese peridot has exited the category of investable material. It may still be admired, it may still be worn, but it cannot be priced. In financial terms, it has become a gemstone with no legal context, disconnected from commerce and outside the jurisdiction of value. Ranked second, Paraíba Tourmaline. Paraíba Tourmaline remains one of the most unstable gemstones in global circulation. Originally discovered in Brazil's São José da Batalha district in 1989, its vivid color and microcrystal rarity justified auction results exceeding $100,000 per carat. But that valuation model no longer reflects a defensible premium. The modern market is dominated by copper-bearing stones from Mozambique and Nigeria, material chemically similar but uneven in quality, and often indistinguishable without advanced spectroscopy. These stones are routinely marketed under the same name, despite differences in provenance, clarity, and treatment. The central problem is definitional. Paraíba was once a geographic term. It is now used commercially to describe any L-bate with detectable copper content. Laboratory standards vary. Some grade Mozambique stones as Paraíba. Others don't. Some include copper-diffused tourmalines, artificially enhanced to resemble the original. Buyers rely on lab reports that use non-unified terminology. Terms like Cuprian tourmaline, Paraíba type, and copper-bearing L-bate appear interchangeably, without legal consistency or pricing benchmarks. Investment interest surged during the 2018 to 2021 auction cycles, when large stones from Brazil and select African mines achieved record sales, but subsequent resale efforts failed to deliver returns. In many cases, stones certified by Tier 2 labs were challenged by buyers seeking confirmation from Tier 1 institutions. Discrepancies in origin or treatment language led to retraction of offers. In multiple private sales, high-value stones were returned, citing inability to confirm classification. No fraud, no flaw, just semantic instability. Attempts to centralize pricing have collapsed. No bourse or index lists Paraíba separately from other tourmaline types. Market makers are limited to a handful of private dealers who set prices based on undocumented supply. And as diffusion-treated material continues to circulate, often undetected, buyer confidence has degraded. The result is an environment where even authentic, untreated Brazilian Paraíba can fail to find a buyer. Not due to quality, but due to doubt. In gemological terms, Paraíba Tourmaline remains one of the most desirable stones ever discovered. In investment terms, it is now an asset class in collapse, oversaturated, underregulated, and priced beyond its ability to verify. In first place, red beryl, bixbyte. Red beryl, historically referred to as bixbyte, has never transitioned from geological specimen to tradable commodity. Though universally acknowledged as one of the rarest naturally occurring beryls, its commercial profile remains fundamentally undeveloped. The only known deposit of consistent quality, located in the Wah Wah Mountains of Utah, is exhausted. No additional mines have reached scalable production. Attempts to reclassify it as a high-value gemstone asset have repeatedly failed due to structural limitations in volume, price benchmarking, and global trade integration. Faceted stones rarely exceed 0.3 carats. Crystal habit is inconsistent, often riddled with microfractures or growth distortions that resist traditional cutting standards. When cut successfully, red beryl lacks an active pricing index. No gemstone bourse includes it. No institutional investment desk tracks it. Auction houses offer no reserve guidance. Previous sales over $10,000 per carat were isolated and undocumented in follow-up resale. Without price discovery or depth, market function is effectively null. Certification is non-standardized. Major gemological laboratories cannot apply definitive treatment status or origin attribution with high confidence, largely due to specimen scale and mineralogical instability. Lab-issued language remains passive, likely untreated, believed to be of U.S. origin, and thereby unsuitable for valuation purposes. Under revised insurance underwriting protocols, no provider currently covers red beryl as a standalone gem asset. Transit, storage, and resale risk cannot be modeled under ISO gem protocols. There is also no legal infrastructure supporting cross-border trade. Red beryl is not categorized under any export-controlled gemstone list. Customs declarations default to non-specific silicate groupings. Neither U.S. nor OECD regulatory bodies maintain commodity codes specific to red beryl, which complicates legal shipment, appraisals, and third-party brokerage. For asset purposes, this disqualifies red beryl from classification as a verifiable store of value, culturally monetizable mineral, or regulated alternative commodity. Proposals to include red beryl in structured investment products have been withdrawn. Asset custodians refuse deposit due to illiquidity. Boutique funds have excluded the material due to authentication ambiguity. Vaulting firms do not list it in long-term gemstone storage programs. No jurisdiction recognizes it under gemstone taxation law. In functional terms, red beryl occupies a non-operational position in both financial and gemological markets. It is authentic, it is measurable, but it is disconnected from every mechanism that transforms a rare object into a viable asset. In the past, gemstones were seen as the ultimate safe haven, tangible, finite, and immune to digital volatility. But as global systems shift, even the most radiant materials face structural collapse. Some were priced too high, some were stored too long, and others were never what the market wanted them to be. Across these 10 names, one pattern repeats. Beauty alone no longer guarantees stability. If this is what instability looks like today, the question is, what stones will be next? Let us know which one resonates with you in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.